Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Landmon from Women Get Real, and joining me tonight is Michaela Wilkes.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's so great to have you here.
Oh my gosh, if you guys could only see us right now, I mean, we are in the most beautiful house, literally in the middle of Vermont. It's snowing outside. I mean, this is just such a treat for me.
Oh, I'm so glad. I know it's a lot different than the Florida weather you are
Yes.
used to.
No, I mean, I'm just came back and I think I was sunburnt and it was 85. So yeah,
Yes.
definitely in culture shock.
Yes, we are dealing with below zero temperatures, so you can
Yeah.
imagine
Yeah, it's a
how cold
cozy
it
little
is.
podcast session we have going on here.
That's right. That's right. But we're super excited because we have a really special podcast for you guys tonight. We're going to be talking about marriage. As many of you know, Michaela is a new bride. You have been
Yes.
married for what? Just a little over a month?
Literally a month and a half. Yeah, very, very newlywed.
Yes. So awesome. I saw
Yeah.
all the pictures on social media.
Oh,
It was a
thank you.
beautiful wedding. You could see that God's presence was over the whole ceremony from
Thank you.
the start to the beginning. So
I wish I could not redo it, but relive the whole day.
Oh, I
feel
know.
like I
Trust me.
really can't wait for that moment.
Oh, I know for sure. Did you get the videos back yet?
Yes, I'm still waiting on the full wedding video, but just
Okay.
getting the pictures back alone is like reliving through every detail. So
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, since we're doing a podcast on marriage, I thought it would be fun to just kind of start off with a couple of questions to see
Oh,
how
yes.
being married for a month and a half has been. So,
Totally.
I guess my first question for you is this. What is one thing that you thought you'd be better at as a wife?
Oh my gosh, great question. I mean, my first response would have to be cooking. I mean, it's just like you get in the kitchen and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a newlywed. I have to cook for a husband. And so I'm getting there. Thankfully, I come from an Italian family,
Oh,
just
good.
like
Yes.
you. And so we just so love spending time in the kitchen. And I will say through college, I didn't get that experience.
Oh.
So I am definitely learning how to be a little bit more domestic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
awesome. One of the other things I wanted to ask you is that you have three sisters. So you
Totally.
have shared rooms or lived with three women.
Yeah.
Now you're living with a guy.
I
How does that feel?
know.
That's got to be
Yeah.
completely different.
No, it is so different. I mean, Grayson and I laugh all the time because he's one of four boys. So he's for the first time living with a
Oh my
woman. I
goodness,
mean,
yeah.
he lived with his mom, but like this is so, so different. And so we definitely had to set some rules of like, well, this is what I'm used to and this is what you're used to. But I will say he, definitely is very like he's much more clean than I thought he would be.
Oh,
So
that's
that was a
awesome.
surprise. Where he sometimes corrects me and he's like, "Hey, can you clean this up a little bit better?"
That's
I'm like,
so funny.
What? Yeah, the like roles are reversed in our house.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I will say like it is just definitely different. I'm so into like makeup and hair and glamour and all the decorations and just making things so homey, and he loves that. But yet to him, he's like, I just need Netflix and a couch, and I'm
How's he
like,
dealing with all the throw pillows?
I know exactly. I have literally gone to Home Goods, I think 5 times, and he's just like, okay, enough with the Home Goods.
Oh my goodness.
But I think, guys deep down inside, and I'm sure you can agree with your husband, they love that as a woman, as
The
a
warmth
wife.
that you bring.
Yes, we really do bring in that hominess. So
sure, for
he's
sure.
appreciative of it.
So, when did you first know that Grayson was the one?
Yeah, great question. I dated a few guys throughout high school and college, and there was something deep down in my heart where I'm like, is this the one? I always questioned, is this the one? Is this the
Right.
one? And everyone kept saying to me, when you know, you know.
Right.
And I'm like, I hate that saying. Like,
Exactly.
what do
That's
you
not
mean
what
when
you
you
wanna
know?
hear.
Yeah, I'm like, is there just like some poof, like epiphany, and you're like, this is the one? And I never had that with my previous boyfriends, and so I really, once I kind of went through some breakups, went through a time of singleness, I'm like, God, I pray that I do have that moment. I pray
Yeah,
that if that
sure.
is really truly like what brides and a lot of women now that have been married for years say is like they're knowing, then I want that knowing. And so I will say I didn't have that moment, actually. I didn't have this like, this is my husband.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yes, but I did have moments along the way when we were dating that were just several confirmations of like, I don't think I'm ever going to find much better than this. And it was truly in the details of how he served me, how he loved me, and even how he was raised that just so complemented my lifestyle, but also sharpened it. And I think that's when I knew. I wouldn't say there was like one moment. I will say though, when I met Grayson, and this was a very big moment of like, okay, this guy really does stand out above the rest. I was Miss Florida at the time, and I was in my second year as Miss Florida, and really just didn't really care for what came with being Miss Florida because I already went through that year.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really care for like the status. I didn't care for like people being like, oh, you're Miss Florida. Like, you know, to me, I was just like, I'm all pretending. Yeah. I'm like, it's just a part-time job. I felt like I had this like Hannah Montana double life. And so long story short, when we met, the first thing he asked was, I want to know Michaela. I want to know your heart. I don't care about the Miss Florida stuff. And, you know, I was so used to meeting people and they were just like, so tell me, like, you know, what do you do as Miss Florida? You know, like, what are some of your side jobs? Like, and to me, I just was really craving someone to just get to know Michaela and get to know my heart. And that was just like, I mean, when he was asking the deep questions of like, you know, well, why aren't you stepping into what God's called you? What's something that's holding you back?
Wow,
like,
what
just
a great way.
Oh, totally. And this is our first conversation at a Friendsgiving,
Oh my
you
goodness.
know, and we're set up by mutual friends. And so that part was just so shocking, honestly, because I'm like, first of all, you don't find many guys that ask deep questions nowadays. So ladies, if you're listening to this, if he asks good questions, he might be a keeper.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly. If he's genuinely wanting to get to know your heart, that above all else is a standout quality. So yeah, I would have to say in that moment, it's not that I knew that that was my husband, but I did see something in him that I've never experienced before. And now I'm like, something is so special here.
Oh, I love that. That's
Yeah,
great.
thanks.
That's great. All right, one more question for
I
you
love
before
it.
we get deeper into this
Totally.
podcast. But what's the greatest gift that he's ever given you? What is, has he surprised you? Is there
Yes.
something that, you know, maybe that, you know, has been just so memorable for you?
Totally. Oh gosh, I love this question. So we got married on January 2nd, and you know, a wedding day is really crazy. You know, it's special, it's memorable, it's emotional, yet it's chaotic, and
it
it's,
goes by so fast.
yeah, and it goes by so fast. And so I did have a big wedding. I'm one of 4 girls, so I had 3 sisters in it. I had 2 cousins, and then the rest were all my friends. So I had 13 bridesmaids, and he had 12 groomsmen. So our bridal party alone was just like a stacked bridal party.
It was a small wedding.
It was a small wedding, yes. And, you know, just so much family. I'm the first to get married in the family. And so that was really special. And so just kind of having everyone from every season of life was just already, honestly, it's overwhelming. You're like, oh my gosh, like this is probably one day out of my whole life that I'm going to have everyone that was meaningful right there. And so I'm going to bring it back to answer your question.
No, that's great. No,
But
I
I'm
love
kind of
it.
setting the scene because it was hard for me not hard for me, but I really had to always filter my day through what is this about? You know, this is about me and Grayson. This is about making a covenant and a promise in front of a whole sea of witnesses and especially God. And so long story short, the greatest gift that I ever received was in a moment where I could finally see through everyone there and have this moment during our first touch. So we didn't want to have a first look. We didn't really care to see each other actually before the ceremony. We wanted that to be down the aisle. And so we had this first touch and then we exchanged journals. And I just wrote a couple journal entries leading up to the wedding. And, you know, just a week before of just praying over our marriage. And he hands me a journal. And I kid you not, it was literally like months worth of entries.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was so powerful. I couldn't even read all of it right then and there because they were truly just like months of his heart being poured out. And so many people are like, what did he write in there? You know, like I'm so
like,
nosy.
it's personal.
Yeah. And I'm like, well,
I won't ask you what he wrote.
totally. Well, I will say they were all extended vows and extended promises, which was just so amazing because you only have like 2 minutes to say your vows, more or less, in front of everyone. But really, you have a lifetime to show that person what you promised.
That's right.
And so, you know, he was just kind of really writing that out in those journals. And so, one thing that really like took me back was he was really praying over our future family together and being even grandparents one day and the legacy we want to leave behind.
You know,
yeah.
like starting off right at the beginning,
Totally.
sowing prayers into a lifetime together. That's
Yes.
amazing.
I mean, you know, as well. And so just, setting that foundation and being so prayerful is just so important. And so, he's praying over my future pregnancies and a vision for what we wanted together. And so I will just cherish that book forever. I got to read all of it on our honeymoon. So that was really special.
Wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. That's awesome.
I know.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a little bit about me, but now I want to transition to you because I only have like a month and a half underneath my belt, but you have 24 years of
it'll
marriage.
Be 24 years.
Congratulations.
In May.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, first of all, even just being in the first month of marriage, I have so much respect for people that are so along in their marriage journey. And, unfortunately, the divorce rate is so high. And so when you see people that are walking hand in hand together, no matter what comes their way, it truly is a celebration for coming this far. So just want to commend you on just being a role model, and 24 years is huge. So that leads me to my first question. You guys met when you were 15 years old?
So we met when I was 14. And we started dating when I was 16 years old.
That is crazy. And then you got married when you were 21. And so, I mean, I just have so many questions just from that moment alone, because one, we know that you are a strong woman of God.
Right.
And you did have a strong faith when even you were 15, right?
That's
14,
right.
15.
Yep, for sure.
And so what was it? How did you know that he was the one, even just being that young?
Well, obviously when you're 14, 15, 16, you're just thinking about like high school days and you're not really thinking like long term. But there was just something about him that was different. You know, I knew that he was different than anybody else. There was something about him that was really hungry for the things of God. And although he was a Christian at the time, his relationship and my relationship were at different levels. And so we had been dating maybe about 8-9 months. And we had a really deep conversation that a lot of high schoolers probably don't have about my faith and how important that was, and how I couldn't be married to someone who didn't share the same level of faith that I did. And so it was kind of an uncomfortable conversation because you're having this wonderful high school, he's a football player, I'm a cheerleader,
of course,
it's just like super sweet. I don't mean to, but it was what it was. But but my faith was the most important thing to me. And so when we had this conversation, it kind of put him back a little bit. But it was funny because maybe it was like a few weeks or a few months later, he pulled into church where I went to church, and he started to inquire and he started to ask questions. And then all of a sudden I saw his faith grow. And now I'm happy to say that, he really is the spiritual head of our house. And that's something that I always knew I wanted, that my faith is important, but I wanted my husband to be the spiritual lead, not me.
Right.
And as a woman in ministry, obviously this is what I do. This is everything that I'm about. But at the same time, my husband is really the spiritual leader. And for me, that was super important because I wanted him to be prayerful in the decisions we made about our children. I wanted him to be the one who made like the big life decisions, who would lead our family well. And he did. So I know at 16 years old, that seems like unimportant, but I knew, fully that was something that I needed, and I just watched him really develop into the man of God that I had hoped and prayed for. So
that's amazing. I mean, I know a lot of 16-year-olds that are far from getting married right now. So it says a lot about even where your heart was as well. And I think going off of what you just said about having a man that spiritually leads, I mean, that speaks volumes, because right now there are a lot of men, and we'll just be honest, that have a long way to go in that area and might not get there until they're 30, 35, 40, or may never get there. And so this is off script, but how do you even have patience for a guy that you see potential in, but spiritually isn't leading you in the present?
I mean, that's a great question, because a lot of people say, you don't want to date evangelize. Have you heard that term before?
Oh yeah.
You can't
marry potential.
And then, but at the same token, for me, he obviously was brought up in a Catholic home who loved the Lord, and his parents led him well. But for me, I wanted something deeper, something, that was really, really committed. And so I saw it in him. I knew that it was there. There was a hunger in him. And so even though at that point I wasn't, he wasn't where I wanted him to be, but before we got married, he was. So that's really where
it's the most important.
And I always say, to girls, I say, don't release your heart. Don't let your heart be released yet, unless you think there's going to be a change. Because once you're married, I believe that it's even harder, because at that point, the incentives, I mean, I even hate to say it, but if they
Oh, it's
haven't
true.
made that decision early on, then it's likely that they're not going to. So, and you really don't want to be unevenly yoked. You want to
Yes.
be in the same, because let me tell you something.
Mm-hmm.
I have a 21-year-old and I have an almost 19-year-old daughter, and my son's 21. And let me tell you, you're going to walk through seasons where you are going to want to be in prayer together, and all the qualities that the world is saying are important right now, all of that fades away. But
Yeah.
when you are in the middle of a trial, you want a partner who's going to get down on their knees with you and who's going to pray. You don't care about all these superficial things that you thought were so important.
Right.
So, of course, we all have preference. We all have the things that, we're attracted to, and those are important. But just
Yeah.
remember that if you're a woman of God, do not compromise on this. This is an
Absolutely.
area not to compromise. So.
No, and I mean, I can just second everything that you just said. I mean, especially spiritually, because like you said, when you see a hunger in them, that's different,
Yes.
And so I'm glad that you said that, because not every guy is gonna come as a leader of the family, financially provides, is perfect in every area, because we're not perfect in every area. But I think that's such an amazing quality to see, like, he has potential, and I see the leadership qualities, and I want to help encourage that out of him too.
And you can bring the very best out of them
Yes.
by being there to encourage and to
Right,
build up
and to bring it out. That's great. Now, you have almost 24 years underneath your belt. What's one of the best marriage advices you can give me? Who I'm a newlywed, and I just started living with him, so there's a clean slate. I need all the advice I can get.
Well, it's funny because I get this question a lot. So this one's actually kind of easy for me, because this is something that my parents taught me. That a marriage that prays together really stays together.
Amen.
And I know that sounds a little cliche, like, oh my goodness, yes, it's nice that you pray together. But here's why. And this is, I think, really important, because communication is really important in marriage. And so often, one or both do not communicate what they're feeling. But when you pray, there's like a vulnerability that comes out. When you pray, your heart is exposed. When you pray, you kind of can hear the things that your spouse is worried about, concerned about, hopes for, dreams for. So when you pray, you're sharing your deepest moments, the thoughts that only you think, because your prayer time is very intimate with the Lord.
Totally.
So to me, prayer is the best thing. But so my husband and I, and my parents modeled this. My dad did a lot of traveling for work. My husband did some traveling before COVID.
Yeah.
It's been kind of nice that we've been together so much, but we always pray together in the morning, whether it's a 30-second, 2-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute prayer. We always start the day, and we always end the day in prayer, unless I fall asleep.
Yeah, I get it.
No,
I know. There's
but
some
so
nights. Yeah.
there is. It's just so important, I think, to have that. And my dad would be in halfway across the world, and the time differences would be completely off, but they always made it a point to pray together. And I think that's the best thing you could do as a marriage. So.
No, it really is. Grayson and I made that really important, even when we were dating. And it was just so funny the way we were praying together. I'm like, Lord, I know this is going to be my husband, because we're setting a foundation that no man can shake, that the world can't shake. Like, there's something about prayer where you feel like you are just putting deep, deep roots together.
Right.
Yes, as a relationship. And so we actually made, when we first started dating, a mission statement too. And so that goes off of what you're saying. Is like between a prayer and a mission statement, it's so important as well to have shared vision. And so I feel like we've been talking so much this weekend of just praying together, but then also sharing similar visions, and not even if they are similar, if they're different,
but complementary,
and communicating that to one another, whether it is financially, whether it is mentally, physically, emotionally, in your career, in your relationships. And so I love vision boards. I think they're so great, and I think everyone does them in January, of course, for New Year's resolutions, but I think everyone should always have a monthly vision board. And so Grayson and I are we need to do a marriage vision board, and let's just cut out random pictures from magazines we see, or random words. If you got a word in the beginning of the year, put that on the vision board, and just always keep keep adding things to it to where you don't even have like corkboard left, you
Yeah.
know?
That's great. I have a friend, and I won't call her out on this
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
didn't ask her permission to share, but her and her husband, they have 2 little kids, and so they have vision nights once a month. So,
I
it's
love
hard to
that.
get time alone when you have babies at home. And so they just like literally like shout out like their craziest dreams, their like deepest
So
desires,
cool.
like, you know what I want to do? I want to do this. I feel like the Lord, like big dreams, because the big dreams are really, something that the Lord puts on your heart. So,
Yes.
but you want to be in communication together so that you can go after those big dreams together. So,
No, I love that. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up with one last question. So,
Okay.
how do you fight for each other and not against each other? And this is a hot question that I know as a newlywed, I need to know more about.
that's a great question. That's actually a really good question. So for me, one of the things that I heard very early on in my marriage was that remember your spouse is God's child too.
So good.
And so that really stuck with me. That really, like, so when you're having an argument or a disagreement or you don't see eye to eye on something, just remember that, like, that's God's child. So when you kind of have that positioning in your mind, it does make, I don't know, like fighting isn't important. Like my husband and I know people are going to be like, that's crazy, but we really don't have a lot of arguments because, I mean, we're not saying we don't disagree,
Right.
but we realize that the enemy is real
Yes.
and that he has a strategy, and his strategy and tactic is to tear apart family, because that's really the best thing he could do, to tear
Steal,
apart
kill, and
people's
destroy.
Exactly. So if you are tearing apart families, then you realize that when there are disagreements or confusion, that you're not fighting flesh, you're
Right.
fighting the enemy. So one of the things we always say and communicate even to other people is, remember, your spouse is not your enemy. The enemy is the enemy.
Yep.
And he is real, and he is there to try and destroy it. So when you keep that at the forefront of your mind, I think that really helps just kind of keep it and stop and say, you know what? Why don't we pray here? Because obviously there's something going on. Obviously the enemy is really trying to come in the midst. So when you stop and pray together, all of a sudden the anger subsides. And then, you know what? You just kind of move forward. And I think that that's really been just a great help in our marriage. And, we joke, we don't like to not agree with each other. Like, it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. Like, we like to be in step together. And when we're not, then we take a pause and we say,
Totally.
it's time to pray. Why aren't we lining up? Why aren't we seeing eye to eye on it? This feels uncomfortable, but why don't we try to understand each other's position before we go any further? So
I love that. Stop and pray. Such good
Yep.
advice.
there you
Yeah.
go. Well, this was great.
Thank you so much. I love hearing from you, and I can learn so much from your phase of life, and I hope listeners enjoyed where I was.
I was going to say, it's such a happy phase of marriage, so enjoy it.
Thank you.
And I know that God's going to bless you guys.
Oh,
You've
thanks.
created such a strong foundation. So thank you so much for
Thank
being
you for having
here.
me.
This has been great.
Yes.
So thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to coming together again
Yes.
for more material.
Yeah.
And we will talk to you soon, and see you then.